Hello, it's me, Robin, with Simple Food, Simple Life. It's Friday, and that means it's Friday Confab. I am so glad for Friday, and I am glad that all of you are here and that you take the time to join me for this little chat. It means the world to me, it really does. So, have you got your coffee, got your tea, got your Coca-Cola? You got your Dr. Pepper? Got your hot chocolate? Or water? Let me know in the comments what beverage you have today. Or maybe you don't have a beverage. Maybe it's just something else. We don't know. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm doing better. I wish I could say I'm doing better every day, but there are days when I'm still struggling a bit. The shingles bring with it other things besides lesions, and which I know more about that than I used to, by the way. So it's okay. This too shall pass. I will get through this, and it will be perfectly fine. I hope. I pray. Last Monday was Memorial Day, and considering this is Friday and we're going to have our confab, I wanted to talk about someone who he was actually a cousin of my mother on her mother's side. He was the son of her mother's sister, my mom's beloved Aunt Bessie, and she had Aunt Bessie and Uncle Gus, and they were very dear to her family. Their son, Raymond, whom I believe was their oldest, was killed in Iwo Jima. And Memorial Day having just passed, I did want to talk about Raymond a little bit. And I have a story to tell you that goes back to the early 1990s that involved my husband and myself regarding Raymond. So I've been wanting to share this with you for a while, but I decided that Memorial Day having just passed, that it would be a good time to share it with you. Because Memorial Day is for those who gave their all for this country, who are in the military, and it's to honor them. So today I'm going to honor Raymond. Raymond Muir was my mother's first cousin. And he was killed in Iwo Jima. He was actually killed on February the 22nd, 1945 in Iwo Jima. And 2 years, it was approximately 2 years before they were able to bring his remains back to the United States. And that was the case with many of our servicemen who were lost, who gave their lives during World War II and other wars. And as we know from Vietnam, some of them have never come back. But it was about 2 years after his passing, his wife, they brought him back, and his wife made the decision to have him buried in Butler National Cemetery, which is in Springfield, Illinois. Butler National Cemetery has a long history going back to the Civil War. And it's quite interesting. You could look it up if you want, just Butler National Cemetery, Springfield, Illinois, and you can find out a lot of things about it. I'm kind of a history buff, so I find that to be interesting. So anyway, Raymond and his wife, his name was Raymond Muir, Alfred Muir. They had no children. He was 30 years old when he passed. And so she elected to have him buried at Butler. My mom said at one point that her Aunt Bessie, his mother, was kind of sad about that because things being what they were in those times, and they lived in Southern Illinois, it was not always easy for them to come up to the cemetery to lay flowers on her son's grave. And then as they got older, they could not come at all. And now, it was in the I'll say this first. Raymond was a beloved cousin on my mother's side of the family. He was older than some of the other grandchildren. And he was, my mother, to quote my mother, he was movie star handsome. He was in the military. He was in the Marines. And he was like this man of the world to them, as they were just country bumpkins. And when he would come back to visit, she said it was so great because he was very kind to the younger kids, and he would take them for a ride in his car and get them a treat or some ice cream or something of that type. She says it was so exciting when Raymond got to come home because he had been everywhere. And she said they all adored him. And she said that when he got married later, actually not too long before he was killed. And his wife was a city woman. She was a city person. And they felt like that they were jealous because they thought that maybe she would take Raymond away from them, and that it wouldn't be the same anymore. So she said she was very nice, but she was a working woman, and she was a city girl. And so it was funny because they simultaneously resented her because she was taking their cousin from them, and they admired her. So anyway, in the 90s, early 90s, my husband's friend was getting married, and he was getting married in Springfield, Illinois. We were invited to the wedding. So we had planned a weekend in Springfield because we were going to, the wedding was on Saturday. And so we were going to go on Friday. There was a party Friday night. And then we were going to the wedding on Saturday, and we were going to come back on Sunday. I happened to mention that to my mother, and she said, if you're going to be in Springfield, she said, would you mind if I have a wreath made for Raymond's grave, would you take it for me and lay it on his grave? And I said, well, sure. Well, it was December, and it was it was just typical December, Midwest December. And it was nearing Christmas, and I said, well, sure. And so she had and she said that she and my dad used to stop by the cemetery and lay a remembrance on Raymond's grave because when they would travel back and forth, but she had not been able to do that in many, many years since dad passed away. So I said, of course, we'd be glad to do that. And I said, and she wrote down Raymond's information on a piece of paper. And I said, well, how will we know which grave is his and how to find his grave? And she said, well, there's an office there. Just go to the office, give them this information, and they'll tell you how to find him. Okay, that's simple enough. So Friday, we drove to Springfield. They had their get together because it was a lot of my husband's friends prior to me coming on the scene. I mean, you know, and so there was a lot of them there from our area. And then Saturday was the wedding. We went to the wedding, and then when we were at the reception later on in the day, my husband began to feel ill, and he thought maybe he was coming down with the flu or something. He was rarely sick, and so I knew that, you know, if he was feeling bad, that wasn't good. And so we left the reception early. We went back to the hotel, and because he just did not feel good at all. So the next morning, he still was not feeling well. He'd had a bit of a rough night, and it had turned, not only was it wasn't just cold and everything was covered with snow, it was miserable. The wind had come up. It was bitter cold that day. And so we got around in the morning, going to head back home. And but I had the wreath. My mom had a very large evergreen wreath made for Raymond's grave, and I had it in the trunk this whole time. It was a live wreath. And so we'll go to Butler, get this done for Mom, and then head back home because he just absolutely did not feel good. So we get to Butler Cemetery, the National Cemetery there, and if there was a small building, it was an office building. It was closed. It was closed. There was nobody there. And we had to put this wreath on his grave, and we didn't know where it was. Now, just so you're aware, Butler Cemetery, it's like a smaller version of Arlington Cemetery. It is a sea of white headstones, and there's like, I don't know, it's like 50 acres, a large area, over 25,000 grave sites at Butler. 25,000. They're white, the white military headstones, like you would see in Arlington. And I said, how are we going to? We have to try. We have to try to find him. I have to be able to tell Mother that we tried. It seemed futile to me and to Tim as well. So we looked, we tried to figure out some rhyme or reason. Maybe World War II veterans were buried here, or, you know, Korean or Vietnam. I couldn't see any logical reason, or, you know, we just tried to figure it out. There was none. And it was so bitter cold. There was no way that we could walk that cemetery. It was, and Tim was sick. So I said, well, we'll just have to drive. we'll just have to drive down, they had the roads through the cemetery. We'll just have to drive, see if we can find it. We have to try. So I was driving, and as I was driving down the middle of the rows, Tim was looking out the passenger side, trying to see if he could see anything that might tell us where Raymond was. And I was driving, trying to drive this narrow road and looking out the driver's side to see if any clue, anything. And we drove for quite a little bit, and we're looking and driving very slowly. And Tim has the piece of paper that my mother wrote Raymond's information on. And Tim, and we were looking, and it felt so hopeless. And finally, I stopped the car, and I had a hold of the steering wheel, and I stopped the car, and I just put my head on the steering wheel, and I thought, what am I going to tell Mother? And then it ran through my brain, okay, maybe I could just put it on someone's grave. But I didn't want to lie to my mom and tell her that that it was Raymond's. I thought, what am I going to tell Mom? And I had my head on the steering wheel like this, thinking, what are we going to do? And Tim said, went down like this, and Tim said, Raymond Muir. And I said, I know what his name is, because I had heard it all my life. My mom talked about Raymond. His picture was in one of the photo albums. I said, I know what his name is. And he said, no. He said, he's right there. I said, what? He said, he's right there. And there he was. There was his gravesite. Just as big as you please, right there. And on the grave, on the headstone, it said, Sergeant Major, Marine Corps, Raymond Alfred Muir. Birth, 26 November 1914, Bridgeport, Lawrence County, Illinois. Death, 22nd February 1945, aged 30. Iwo Jima. And we were stunned. It was as if for that moment, time stood still. And it was as if Raymond, whom I'd always heard about and seen his picture, it was as if Raymond said, someone is looking for me, and they are going to find me. And we were stunned. And it was so cold and so bitter, and Tim was so ill. I got out of the car by myself, and I pulled a wreath from the trunk, and I went over to Raymond's grave, and I laid it on his grave, and I thanked him. First of all, I thanked the Lord for bringing us here to that exact spot. And then I thanked Raymond for his service. And I told him that I loved him and that our mother always told us about you and how wonderful you were. And that she sends her love to you. And there was no one else there, and no one in the cemetery, and the silence, the cold and the silence and the wind. It was as if we were in this precious bubble that, and in this was a miracle. It was a miracle. And so I got back in the car. We were driving home. We didn't say a word. It was beyond words. We could not speak about it. It was it was a sacred time. And finally, we were many miles. We were halfway home, and we spoke about it. And then, of course, a couple of days later, I went out to see Mom to assure her that we did lay the wreath and tell her what had happened. And she cried. For years after that, we would be going somewhere, and my husband would just out of the blue say Raymond Muir, and it was as if, and my husband loved the veterans and anyone who served, and he said, I will never forget that as long as I live. Nor will I. So I just wanted to share that with you. Because my mother and sometimes my aunt would talk about their dear cousin. And I understand that because I have some dear cousins as well, some are gone now. And older cousins. And they kept his memory alive. And they kept his memory alive for those in a younger generation who would never meet him, who would never have contact with him. And so, having heard stories, we sort of felt like, well, we knew Raymond. Raymond was just somebody that we cousins and we kids, we knew about Raymond. And he sacrificed all. He sacrificed all for his country. Thank you, Raymond, for your sacrifice. All right. That's it for me today. I love you guys. You know I do. And as always, you know that little is much when God is in it. And I wanted to show you Raymond one more time. He was pretty handsome. He was very handsome. And having looked up his history, he'd been everywhere. He had been everywhere. Especially in Asia and other places too. So if any of you have a Memorial Day story to tell, please put it in the comments, because I think it would be wonderful if you would share it with us. And if you have any of those miracles, to me it is a miracle of grace, let us know. Share it with us, because we all need to be encouraged. We need to be encouraged with your stories as well. Okay? All right. I love you guys. You know I do, as always. I already said that, right? You know. That little is much when God is in it. Worth repeating every time. All right. Talk to me in the comments. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen today. And hopefully I will see you on Monday. All right. Love ya. Talk to you later. Bye.